Imagine this scenario for a second. You have just spent, I don't know, maybe 40 exhausting hours locked in an edit bay.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. You've color graded every single clip to absolute perfection. Your audio mix is totally broadcast ready, your transitions are seamless, and you finally hit that export button. You send that massive file off to your client, feeling like a cinematic genius.
And then disaster strikes.
Exactly. The file gets completely rejected by the broadcaster because the codec is, well, it's just wrong for their playback system. Or even worse, the video goes live, and 48 hours later, your client gets hit with a massive copyright lawsuit.
Yeah, just because you misunderstood the difference between a location permit and a talent release.
Right, and all that spontaneous creative magic you felt back in the edit bay, completely worthless.
It really is the ultimate nightmare for any professional video editor. And the crazy thing is, it happens way more often than people realize.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think we're culturally conditioned to believe that video editing is just, dumping footage onto a timeline and kind of mashing buttons until art magically happens.
Yeah, we treat the software like a magic wand. But if you are stepping into a true professional workflow, which is exactly what we are examining today as we look at the core principles behind the Adobe Premiere Pro exam objectives, you quickly realize that a successful video isn't built on spontaneous magic at all.
No, not at all. It is built on deliberate, meticulous architecture.
Exactly. So, welcome to your deep dive. Today, we are tackling a massive driving question. How do media creators plan content that actually connects with a specific audience and purpose?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because here is the big idea for you today. Every single video is created for a specific audience, a clear purpose, and a defined outcome. If you skip this, your video fails before you even hit record. So let's unpack this. Because we aren't just opening up Premiere Pro and memorizing keyboard shortcuts today, are we?
Definitely not. If you are aiming to be a real professional, you have to understand how Premiere Pro serves the entire workflow process. Long before you ever double-click that purple icon on your desktop, you have to define the human element of your project. We usually call this the who and the why.
Okay, let's start with the who. Who is this video actually for? We hear the term target audience thrown around constantly in marketing meetings. But from an editorial perspective, making a video for everyone means you are basically making a video for absolutely no one.
That is spot on. You have to determine whether your content is actually relevant to a highly specific group of people.
Right. Are we cutting a fast-paced recruitment video for college freshmen? Or are we cutting an internal quarterly earnings report for a corporate board of directors?
And what's really fascinating here is how the psychographics of your audience physically dictate your editing decisions.
Wait, what do you mean by physically dictate?
Well, you aren't just looking at basic demographics like age or location. You are looking at viewer expectations and, crucially, their cognitive load.
Okay.
So think about a hyperkinetic, jump-cut heavy montage with a really driving bass line. That might thrill a teenage demographic on a social platform because, their visual processing speed for short-form content is incredibly high.
They're used to swiping fast.
Exactly. But take that exact same editing style into a corporate boardroom. You will literally exhaust those executives. They need breathing room in the edit to actually process the data on screen.
That makes a lot of sense. The audience literally dictates the pacing, which naturally leads us to the why. Why does this video exist in the first place?
Right. It's our job as editors to interpret the overarching client goals. And usually a video falls into one of four main pillars. It's either to inform, to promote, to entertain, or to educate.
And you have to synthesize that purpose into a concrete call to action.
Right.
What exactly do we want this specific audience to learn, and what is the behavioral outcome we want after the screen goes black?
Yes. If you want to think about it as a rigid equation, it's audience plus purpose equals your direction.
Okay, but let me challenge that for a second. That equation sounds great in a textbook, but out in the real world, client goals are usually incredibly vague.
Oh, absolutely.
A client rarely comes to you and says, our purpose is to educate millennials to increase our conversion rate by 4%. No. They come to you and say, hey, we want a video that makes us look cool. make it pop.
Make it pop, the classic client note.
Right. So how does an editor actually translate make it pop into actual sequence settings?
That right there is the defining skill of a lead editor or a post-production supervisor. You have to interrogate that vague communication. When a client says make it pop, you have to ask pop for who and where are they watching it?
So you force them to be specific.
You have to. If you don't extract the true purpose, the message becomes entirely unclear. And if the underlying message is confused, it really doesn't matter how incredible your color grading is in Premiere Pro. You are just polishing a confused idea.
Okay, so once we have interrogated the client and locked down that who and the why, we have to figure out the where and the how. Knowing why we are making this video directly dictates where it is going to live.
Precisely. You must identify technical requirements based on exactly how the project will be delivered, distributed, and consumed.
Let's visualize this for you listening. Imagine your client wants a massive cinematic brand anthem to play on a huge projector at an industry convention.
Okay.
That requires a traditional 16:9 horizontal aspect ratio. But then they say they also want a version to run as a sponsored ad on TikTok or Instagram Reels.
Right, which is a 9:16 vertical aspect ratio.
Exactly. And not only is the shape completely different, but the way a viewer interacts with a phone screen held 6 inches from their face is totally different from how they watch a projector screen from 50 feet away in a dark room.
And that delivery destination dictates all your underlying technical basics, specifically your codecs and your compression settings.
Which a lot of people mess up.
A lot of intermediate editors know how to select a preset from a drop-down menu, sure, but they don't actually understand the mechanism.
So what is a codec, really?
A codec literally stands for coder-decoder. It is a mathematical algorithm that compresses vast amounts of visual data by basically throwing out information the human eye can't easily perceive.
Right, because an uncompressed 4K video file would, fill up a hard drive in a matter of minutes?
Exactly. It's massive. So if you are delivering for a cinema screen, you need a codec that retains massive amounts of color data and detail, even if the file size is huge.
Because they'll see every pixel on a big screen.
Right. But if you are delivering for a quick social media update over a cellular network, you need a highly compressed codec, one that sacrifices some of that invisible data so the video buffers instantly on a smartphone. The delivery entirely dictates the math.
Okay, so understanding that math brings us to the how, which is the pre-production planning phase. To communicate your project plans, you need standard industry tools. We're talking script writing, storyboards, and incredibly detailed shot lists.
Yes. The goal is to think like an editor before the lens cap ever comes off.
You have to understand editorial principles like film form really early on.
You do. You need to plan your wide establishing shots to give geographical context and your tight close-ups to deliver emotional resonance. And you really need to plan for L-cuts and J-cuts in production.
Oh, let's pause on that because L-cuts and J-cuts are brilliant psychological tools. Just to clarify the mechanism for you listening, a J-cut is when the audio of the next shot precedes the video. So you hear a person speaking, and a second later the video cuts to their face.
Yep.
And an L-cut is the opposite. The video cuts away to something else, but the audio of the first person keeps playing. Why do these work so well?
Because they mimic human biology.
Wait, really? How so?
Think about it. When you are in a crowded room and someone calls your name, you hear their voice first, and then your head turns to look at them. A J-cut simulates that exact cognitive anticipation.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, it makes an edit feel invisible because the audience's brain has already transitioned to the new scene via the audio before the visual even cuts. But here's the catch. To pull that off in Premiere, the editor needs handles.
Handles being the extra seconds of footage before the action starts.
Exactly. If the crew didn't plan for that on set and they just yell action right as the person talks, the editor is trapped. They can't do the J-cut.
Okay, I'm going to push back on this rigid planning structure for a second.
Sure.
Because I look at the landscape of modern media, right? The run-and-gun vloggers, the street interviewers on TikTok, the documentary filmmakers who just embed with the subject. They aren't walking around with a clipboard and a storyboard. Doesn't over-planning kill that spontaneous magic that audiences seem to crave right now?
It's a great observation, but honestly, it's a total illusion.
An illusion.
Yeah. The best so-called spontaneous creators on the internet actually possess a deep, internalized architecture. A top-tier vlogger might not have a physical storyboard, but they have an invisible shot list in their head.
Wow.
They know they need an establishing shot of the building they're walking into. They know they need a cutaway of their hands holding the coffee cup just to cover a jump cut later. They know they need to let the camera roll for 5 seconds before they speak to give themselves those editing handles.
So they were basically shooting for the edit, even on the fly.
Exactly. Without that internalized plan, you don't get spontaneity, you get panic, you end up in the edit bay with mismatched continuity, jarring cuts, and no B-roll to hide your mistakes. A shot list doesn't trap you. It ensures you capture the foundational puzzle pieces so you can actually afford to be creative when you finally sit down at the computer.
Okay, consider me convinced. So we've planned the shoot, we've gathered the footage, now we enter the system, we move through the professional workflow process, from pre-production planning to production shooting, and finally, we arrive in post-production to organize our reality.
And this is where we finally actually open Premiere Pro. Right. But a professional workflow at this stage means establishing an incredibly strict technical foundation. So strict that any editor could hypothetically sit down at your computer and immediately know where everything is.
Let's talk about that foundation. When you create a new project, you aren't just naming the file and hitting enter, you are setting up scratch disks.
Yes.
And the best way I can explain a scratch disk to you listening is to think of your computer as a physical office. If you are writing a massive, complex essay on your main desk, you don't want all your messy reference books, your highlighters, and your rough drafts cluttering up that exact same desk.
It would be a nightmare.
Right. You want a separate, massive workbench just for the temporary tools. A scratch disk tells Premiere to store all its temporary render files and audio previews on a completely separate drive, so it doesn't choke the hard drive where your actual software is trying to run.
That is a perfect analogy, and once your workspace architecture is built, you use the project panel to bring order to chaos. But we aren't just throwing files into random folders, we are standardizing our bin structures.
Right, because if you work in a real post-production house, you don't just name a bin Tuesday footage. You use a numbered system, like 01_media, 02_sequences, 03_audio.
Exactly. That way, the bins always lock into alphabetical order. And if you have to hand the project file over to a colorist, they instantly know the anatomy of your project.
Makes total sense.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, ensuring technical quality relies entirely on this organized foundation. You are relinking offline files. You are using metadata to tag your clips with keywords so you can search through hundreds of hours of footage in seconds. You are interpreting footage to ensure, say, a 60 frames per second clip plays back correctly in a 24 frames per second timeline. And crucially, you are creating proxies.
Oh man, proxies are absolute lifesavers. If you aren't using them, you are literally torturing your computer. Let's explain the mechanism here for a second. When you shoot massive uncompressed 4K or 8K files, your computer's processor has to do a tremendous amount of math just to play back a single second of video.
It's just too much data.
Right. If you try to scrub backwards and forwards quickly on the timeline, your system will just freeze.
So an offline workflow utilizes proxies. You basically tell Premiere Pro to render out a temporary, highly compressed, low-resolution copy of all your footage.
And these files are incredibly lightweight.
Exactly. You do all your creative cutting, trimming, and slicing using these blurry, lightweight proxy files. Your computer runs incredibly fast. And then, when you are completely finished, Premiere seamlessly swaps the high-quality, heavy 4K originals back into place for the final export.
It is brilliant. So the workspace is organized, our proxies are attached, and we begin assembling the sequence. And here's where it gets really interesting. The Editor's Toolbox in Premiere Pro 2025 has introduced tools that fundamentally alter how we sculpt a narrative.
Oh, absolutely.
The biggest one, text-based editing.
It is a total paradigm shift. Historically, an editor had to listen to an entire interview in real time, just scrubbing back and forth forever.
But now, Premiere's AI engine just auto-transcribes the audio in the background, mapping the spoken phonemes directly to the video's timecode.
Which means you can edit the video by literally editing a text document.
It's mind-blowing. You pull up the transcript, you highlight a sentence you don't like, you hit the delete key, and Premiere automatically performs a ripple delete down in the video timeline.
Yep, it just removes the footage and snaps the remaining clips together.
You can filter out filler words, all those ums and ahs, or remove long, awkward pauses with a single click. It completely revolutionizes the speed of cutting a rough cut.
It frees the editor to focus on the story rather than just the mechanics of the Razor tool. And beyond text, we now have really powerful AI tools for transforming the visual footage itself. Think back to our earlier problem, where the client wants both a 16 by 9 horizontal video and a 9 by 16 vertical video.
Right. Traditionally, panning and scanning a horizontal shot to fit a vertical screen meant manually animating keyframes for hours just to keep the subject in the center of the frame.
Exactly. But now, tools like Auto Reframe use machine learning to identify the focal point of the action, say, a skateboarder moving across the screen, and it automatically generates tracking keyframes to keep them perfectly centered in a vertical crop.
That saves so much time.
Or, if a shot is framed just a little too tight, Generative Expand can literally paint new photorealistic pixels outside the boundaries of your original footage to physically widen the shot.
It's incredible. But with all these flashy AI tools, we cannot forget about accessibility. This is a massive part of the exam objectives and, frankly, a massive part of being a responsible professional.
It really is.
We are talking about implementing captions, subtitles, and audio descriptions.
And you have to understand the distinction there. Subtitles translate spoken dialogue for someone who doesn't speak the language, but they assume the viewer can still hear the music and sound effects.
Captions, specifically closed captions, transcribe the dialogue, but they also describe the audio cues like, bracket eerie music playing bracket or bracket door slams bracket. And that's for viewers who are deaf or hard of hearing.
And it goes beyond just text, right? Applying proper color contrast so your graphics are legible for visually impaired viewers, and ensuring audio clarity so the background music doesn't drown out the dialogue. Accessibility features aren't just regulatory checkboxes to tick off.
No, not at all.
They are the ultimate fulfillment of making sure your content actually reaches and serves the target demographics we spent so much time defining at the start.
That is exactly how an editor should view it. It's essentially user experience design.
Okay, so the edit is locked, it looks fantastic, the text is legible, the audio is perfectly mixed, the story flows beautifully, but before we send it out into the world, we need a final reality check on our initial goals and, critically, our legal liabilities.
Yeah, this is where so many projects stumble right at the finish line. Let's do a quick mental exercise for you listening. A quick practice scenario. Imagine you were hired to create a promotional video for a community fall festival right on the town square. Think back to our very first steps. Who is it for?
Local families.
Right. What is the client's goal? To drive ticket sales. Where will it be posted? Local Facebook groups and Instagram ads.
Okay, so you've got a great plan. You've cut a dynamic sequence, but in your edit, you used a popular top 40 pop song you just ripped from YouTube to give it energy.
Oh.
Yeah, and you included tight, recognizable footage of a local celebrity who just happened to be walking through the background. And to top it off, you used some AI-generated artwork for the opening title sequence.
Oh boy. So what does this all mean?
This raises a massive question about intellectual property, rights, permissions, and licensing. You must evaluate all third-party content. Do you have the usage rights for that top 40 song?
Definitely not.
No. That is blatant copyright infringement, and the social media algorithms will automatically detect it and mute your video, or, honestly, ban your client's account entirely.
Let's drill down into the legal mechanics of the footage itself, because there is a critical difference between different types of permissions. Can you clarify the exact difference between getting permission for a location versus getting a talent release? Because in our fall festival scenario, it feels really easy to mix those two up.
It is a vital legal distinction. Let's say you got written permission from the city council to bring your commercial cameras and tripods to the town square.
Okay.
That is a location permission that legally protects your right to occupy that physical space and film the general public area. However, if you zoom in on a specific person's face, like that local celebrity walking by, and you use their recognizable likeness in a video designed to commercially promote the festival and sell tickets, you have crossed a legal line.
Because you're using them to sell something.
Precisely. To use their face to sell a product, you need them to sign a talent release. Permission to occupy a space is entirely separate from the right to commercialize a person's identity.
This is exactly why we brought up the stakes at the very beginning of the show. A beautiful color-graded export means absolutely nothing if it gets your client sued for right of publicity violations.
Exactly. And the same caution applies to AI-generated content. The legal precedents regarding who holds the copyright to generative art are shifting daily. If you use AI-generated artwork for a client's commercial logo, you might not be able to legally trademark it You have to assess all of this liability before you export.
And speaking of export, that is the final mechanical step in our workflow. You're checking your sequence for technical errors, making sure there are no accidental one-frame gaps in the timeline, checking that your audio isn't peeking into the red, verifying your safe margins for broadcast. And then you utilize Adobe Media Encoder.
Media Encoder is the absolute workhorse of a professional workflow because we established earlier that we need a 16:9 version for the projector and a 9:16 version for mobile. We really don't want to tie up Premiere Pro rendering those one at a time.
Because then you can't edit while it renders.
Right. Media Encoder allows for batch processing. You send your sequences over, queue them up with their specific codecs, and have it export to multiple target screen sizes in the background, freeing you up to keep editing in Premiere.
And the very last thing you do, you archive. You use the Project Manager tool to collect all your scattered media files, consolidate them into one single folder, and essentially pack up the project neatly.
Yes.
This allows you to hand the entire contained universe of the project over to the client or move it to a cold storage hard drive, which frees up your main system without losing any of your hard work.
A meticulously clean workspace at the end of the project is just as important as a clean workspace at the beginning. It ensures the project lives on long after the final export.
All right, let's bring this all home. Here is your core skills reminder for Objective 1.1. Identify your target audience's psychographics. Define a clear purpose and a strong call to action. Match your technical codecs and aspect ratios to the specific delivery platform. Create an invisible architecture and plan your shots before you ever hit record. And finally, follow a professional, organized workflow that protects you both technically and legally.
And I just want to leave you with one final concept to mull over. The next time you are scrolling on your phone and a highly engaging commercial or a viral video hooks your attention, I challenge you to stop watching it like a passive consumer.
Ooh, I love this.
Try to reverse engineer their plan. Ask yourself, what did their invisible shot list look like? Why did they use a J-code at that specific emotional moment? Who exactly was their target demographic? And what was the subtle call to action hidden in the messaging?
Yes, look past the screen. Look for the mechanism. Once you start seeing the underlying blueprint in everyday media, you stop being just a viewer and you start seeing the matrix like a true editor. It turns out video editing isn't about mashing buttons in a dark room. It's about mastering the architecture of human connection. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you in the timeline.